There are places in history you were never meant to touch. Names that were written only in whispers, then erased. Stories that governments, churches, and families agreed should never again meet the light of day. And yet, they live beneath the skin of this world, waiting for someone reckless enough to speak them aloud. Tonight, that someone is me. Before we begin, I want you to do one thing. Like this video, subscribe if you dare, and in the comments, tell me where in the world you're watching from. Because when you hear what follows, you'll feel the walls of your own home differently. Shadows will breathe differently. And knowing where you stand in the map of this story may save you from doubting your own mind later. This begins not in a grand palace or cathedral, but in a small farmhouse on the edge of a pine forest in America's deep south. The year was 1821, and the Dalton family lived in a place already older than it should have been. The wood of their walls was blackened not with fire, but with rot that refused to be cured. Doors never closed right, no matter how many times they were mended. And in the night, people swore they heard the sound of water dripping inside walls where no pipes existed. The family had 3 children, Sarah, Eliza, and Rebecca, known later as the Dalton sisters who never grew old. Their story, though wrapped in folklore, in police reports, in vanished census records, always returns in fragments. A diary found buried in clay, a confession etched into the wall of a prison cell, a photograph that shows no decay in their faces, though the picture itself crumbles with time. The hook of their tale is not that they survived tragedy, not that they resisted death, but that time itself seemed to curl away from them, leaving them untouched, while every soul they loved withered into bone and soil. The first clue came from neighbors. They whispered that the Dalton daughters sang in the fields late at night, long after their parents had gone to bed. Songs that weren't hymns or lullabies. Songs that weren't even English, though the family came from Wales. The language was sharp, broken, filled with sounds that didn't belong to the throat. Dogs howled when they heard it. Lamps dimmed, and always, the sisters seemed taller the next morning, though years passed and their faces never changed. At first, it was dismissed. Children's games. Strange imagination. But then came the harvest of 1824, when every crop in the surrounding valley rotted before it could be gathered, except the Daltons' fields. Their corn stood tall. Their beans bore fruit. And when questioned, the sisters only smiled, their teeth too white against the dusk. The county's preacher took it upon himself to intervene. He claimed they had been touched by the devil. He stood before their door, Bible in hand, voice cracking through the humid air. But when he opened his mouth to condemn them, no words came. Only a guttural cough, then blood. He died within the month, wasting away without illness that anyone could name. And from that moment, fear took root. But fear is not the whole story. Fear is the seed. What it grows into, what it feeds, that is what the Dalton sisters learned to harvest. And it is here our descent begins. Because if you follow their line, if you trace the marks they left in burned registries and hidden medical notes, you find patterns repeating across decades. You find names scratched out, not for mistakes, but for protection. And you begin to understand that the Daltons were not alone. They were one of many. And worse still, they knew exactly what they were becoming. History often hides monsters in plain sight, not the ones with claws and fangs, but the ones that wear human faces so convincingly that even their own families cannot tell the difference. By the winter of 1826, the Dalton sisters should have been young women, 17, 16, and 14. But in every description, neighbor testimony, scraps of letters, they remained unchanged. Hair the same length, eyes the same brightness, voices pitched exactly as they had been in childhood. Rebecca, the youngest, had a laugh that people said could carry half a mile. It was not joyous. It was sharp, metallic, like a blade struck against stone. Sarah, the eldest, had a stillness about her that unsettled even adults. She could sit unmoving for hours, eyes fixed on a single object, until people forgot she was alive at all. And Eliza had the strangest gift. She could recall conversations word for word, even years later. If she had heard you once, she could repeat you forever. Some called it genius. Others called it unnatural. But whispers grew louder when livestock began to vanish. Not killed, not butchered, but gone. Barn doors found unlocked. Hoof prints leading to nowhere. In the mornings, the Dalton girls would appear in their fields with fresh mud on their skirts, despite no rain having fallen. The breaking point came when a traveling doctor, curious about the rumors, asked to examine them. He recorded his observations in a journal now locked in a university archive, hidden under miscellaneous. His words still breathe dread across the page. The subjects are without the natural signs of development expected of girls their age. Skin unwrinkled, pulse slow to the point of absence. Eyes dilated, though, in full light. When pricked with a needle, blood emerges black, as if from soil rather than vein. The journal cuts off there. The doctor vanished before he could publish. His wagon was found overturned, horses mutilated, belongings scattered. His body never recovered. What followed was silence. Families stopped speaking of the Daltons in public. The church boarded its windows, unable to confront them. And the sisters began to walk into town less often. When they did, people swore their shadows were wrong. Too long for the sun's position. Too sharp against the earth. But there was one man who did not stay silent. Sheriff Matthew Haller. His records, preserved in brittle ink, still hold the last official account of the Dalton sisters in Georgia. I fear the children are no longer children. They have grown strange, unbound by what God gives or takes. I have prayed, I have watched, I have waited, and yet they remain untouched by time, their laughter curdling in my ears. If something is not done, they will outlive us all. Those were his last words on the subject. He, too, disappeared. His badge was found nailed to the Dalton barn door. No blood, no body, only the faint smell of iron in the soil. And from then, the land itself seemed cursed. Crops grew twisted. Streams ran shallow. Birds avoided the skies above the Dalton farm. Yet the sisters thrived, unchanging, walking through the decay like untouched statues. This is where myth and history blur. But one truth remains. The Dalton sisters were never buried. Their graves were never dug. Their end was never recorded. They simply moved, vanishing into another county, another state, carrying their secret with them. Imagine for a moment never aging, never shifting from a body you knew in youth. Eternal, unmarked, while every friend, every sibling, every parent you love withers before you. Most people dream of immortality. The Dalton sisters show us why it is a curse. Local legends grew darker. A minister in Alabama claimed the girls had been seen at midnight kneeling in a circle, chanting. The words were never identified, but the effect was documented. Livestock in the area were found drained of fluid. The soil beneath the circle was scorched, as though struck by lightning. Yet the sky had been clear. The pattern repeated: appearance, anomaly, disappearance. Each time, the land was left poorer, weaker. Families that lived near them moved away. Churches lost congregations. Small towns withered into ghost towns. But the sisters endured. Then, in 1852, came the most chilling encounter. A boy named Nathaniel Croy, only 9 years old, claimed he heard voices calling his name from the woods. He followed, against his mother's warnings. He vanished for 3 days. When he returned, his hair had turned white. He spoke little, only repeating one phrase again and again. They said the dead don't sleep. They said the dead don't sleep. Nathaniel's mother wrote her account in a letter that survives in the Library of Congress, though buried in an uncatalogued box. Within weeks, Nathaniel died in his sleep, body unmarked, eyes open. The sisters were seen near the Croy home the night he vanished. No one confronted them. No one ever did. And yet, the pattern is undeniable. The Dalton sisters were not merely surviving. They were feeding. Feeding not on food, not on flesh, but on something deeper: time, vitality, essence. A hunger no scripture ever warned against, because no scripture dared to name it. The old world had a name for such beings. Not vampire, not witch. Those words are too simple. They were called the everborn, children who never crossed into adulthood, locked in eternal harvest of the living world. And every culture that whispered of them agreed on one thing. Once you heard their story, you could never forget it, because forgetting would be the first step toward becoming one of them yourself. The Dalton sisters' trail fades after the 1850s, but silence in history is never emptiness. It is concealment. Across the Reconstruction years, America changed. Towns grew, railroads carved through forests, industry replaced farmland. And yet, scattered like bloodstains, stories of three ageless girls kept surfacing. In Missouri, a family reported three strangers staying in their boarding house in 1868. They signed the guest book with the names Sarah, Eliza, and Rebecca. Ages listed: 17, 16, and 14, exactly as they had been 50 years earlier. The ink is still visible today. In Louisiana, a parish priest noted in his diary that three girls came to confession late one evening. He claimed they spoke in perfect Latin, though none had formal education. Their sins, he wrote, were unspeakable, yet without remorse. Days later, his church burned to the ground. Witnesses swore they saw the girls walking away, their faces lit by the flames, untouched by smoke. And then there is the most disturbing report buried in military records. During the Civil War, Union soldiers marching through Georgia stumbled upon an abandoned house. Inside, three girls sat at a table, eating silently. The soldiers asked their names. The eldest replied, "We have no names you could bear." The men fled. When they returned days later, the house was gone. Not burned, not collapsed, gone, as though erased from the land itself. It is here, when evidence becomes too consistent to dismiss, that we must ask, what were the Dalton sisters? Were they cursed, chosen, or had they stumbled upon a ritual so ancient that even time bowed before it? The answer may lie in what little we know of their Welsh ancestry. In the valleys of Wales, long before Christianity reached, there were whispers of children of the mound, beings who never aged, who fed on the life around them. They were not worshipped. They were feared. Offerings were left to keep them away. And if they entered your home, your lineage ended within a generation. The Daltons, whether by blood or by practice, carried that legacy into America. And once here, in a land already scarred by its own violences, they found soil rich enough to root themselves in forever. But to trace their path forward, you must also trace the silence they left behind. The towns erased, the names scratched from records, the officials who vanished after trying to expose them. And the silence grows louder as the years go on. By the dawn of the 20th century, the Dalton sisters should have been dust. Instead, their story entered a new phase, one entwined with institutions far larger than a farmhouse or a parish. Reports from psychiatric hospitals in the early 1900s describe patients screaming about three girls who never blink. Doctors dismissed them as hallucinations, but the consistency is impossible to ignore. One asylum in Kentucky burned all patient files after a riot. Survivors whispered that three girls had been seen walking the halls days before the fire, their eyes glinting like glass in the gaslight. At the same time, photographs began to circulate in private collections, grainy, damaged, but always the same. Three figures, unchanged, in crowds that otherwise showed the march of decades. Their dresses modernized, their surroundings shifted, but their faces remained eternal. And then came the most forbidden revelation: government interest. In 1923, a classified memo within the Bureau of Investigation, precursor to the FBI, detailed an anomalous family line of three female subjects, unchanged by time, resistant to natural decay, and linked to multiple disappearances across southern states. The file ends abruptly, sealed with the word terminated. But no termination ever occurred. From here, their trail weaves into power itself. Institutions that feared them began to study them. Hospitals wanted their blood. Scientists wanted their cells. And still, the Dalton sisters walked untouched, moving through history like phantoms no law could bind. But those who pursued them met grim fates. Scientists went mad. Doctors died in sudden accidents. Politicians' children vanished without trace. Always at the edges of the story, 3 girls remained. And this is where our descent deepens, because the Daltons are not a relic of the 19th century. They are a presence, a pattern. And the question that must gnaw at your mind is simple. If they were never destroyed, if they were never buried, where are they now? The truth about beings like the Dalton sisters is never written in the open. It lingers in margins, in erased lines, in records hidden under the wrong names. But if you dig deep enough, if you peel back the layers of dust and denial, a pattern emerges. The sisters were not anomalies. They were initiates. In 1931, a university professor in Massachusetts published a paper on folklore survivals in rural America. Buried in his footnotes is a curious passage. Several informants in the Georgia and Alabama regions insist on the existence of 3 undying girls, unchanged in appearance for more than a century, and connected to rites of preservation whispered from the old country. The paper was dismissed as eccentricity. Yet weeks later, the professor was found drowned in his own study. No water source nearby. His lungs filled with brine as if dragged from the sea. But the deeper horror is this. The Dalton sisters had moved from rural obscurity into the heart of institutions. They were seen on the steps of hospitals. They were whispered of in Washington. There are reports, never public, only muttered by descendants of men who once worked in intelligence, that in 1938, 3 young women sat quietly in a room in New York while officials debated whether they could be harnessed. Harnessed, what a word! As though time itself were a machine to be yoked. As though immortality could be bottled, studied, broken down into a medicine for the powerful. But those who tried to cage the Daltons never returned. A lab in Maryland burned to the ground, all research destroyed. Witnesses swore they saw 3 girls walking into the woods as fire consumed the building, their dresses unburned, their faces unreadable. The sisters were no longer fugitives. They were participants in a game greater than survival, a game of control, of access, of secrecy. And those who understood this began to change their approach. Not resistance, not exposure, but silence, an agreement to never speak of them, so long as they remained useful. And if you think that is speculation, consider this. In 1941, a hospital in Chicago admitted 3 sisters injured in a train accident. Their wounds healed overnight. Nurses reported their blood was black, their skin feverless. By morning, they had vanished from their beds. The hospital records list them as Dalton. No first names, no ages, just a surname. The files were sealed, then removed entirely. This is the shape of real history, not dates and wars, but quiet erasures, invisible bargains, things hidden in plain sight because they are too large, too dangerous, too true. And the Dalton sisters, moving untouched through each decade, were no longer simply anomalies. They were becoming something else. A reminder that the human world is not run by laws of flesh and bone, but by ancient pacts we were never meant to see. The Second World War tore apart nations, but it also opened doors into darker pursuits. Behind the smoke of battle, governments sought not only weapons, but knowledge, secrets to extend life, to control minds, to bend reality itself. And here, the Dalton sisters emerge once more, like shadows walking through fire without burning. A declassified fragment from 1944, buried in the National Archives, references subjects S, E, and R, unchanging female trio, origin unknown, observed at facility. No details are given, only a note that they were unreliable for field deployment and recommended for continued observation. Imagine the arrogance of men, thinking they could use the everborn as tools of war. Imagine believing you could order beings who had watched generations die while they remained untouched. The Dalton sisters were not soldiers. They were not pawns. They were spectators, feeding on the chaos, walking through hospitals filled with the dying, absorbing time itself as bombs fell. Survivors from a prisoner camp in Eastern Europe spoke of 3 angels who walked among them at night. Not angels of mercy. Angels of silence. The sickest prisoners vanished. Their bunks found empty. And in the moonlight, 3 figures stood by the fence, their eyes reflecting light like mirrors. The soldiers who guarded the camp swore they never opened the gates. Yet the prisoners disappeared all the same. After the war, the sisters were reported in Germany, in Italy, in France. Always on the edges of ruin. Always were bodies piled high. And then they returned to America as though nothing had happened. They appeared in photographs from social clubs in the 1950s, smiling, unchanged as generations passed around them. But what do they want? That is the question that claws at every historian, every investigator who dares to follow their line. They wanted neither wealth nor fame. They left no writings, no statements. They simply were an eternal presence slipping between cracks of time, feeding when needed, hiding when threatened. And yet, the deeper you look, the more one truth emerges. They were not drifting aimlessly. They were following a pattern, an invisible map. Every place they touched weakened. Every institution they brushed against fractured. Every person who tried to contain them vanished. They were not surviving. They were pruning, shaping, cultivating a silence where only they could thrive. This is not the immortality of myth. This is not the blessing men dream of. This is the curse of the everborn, and it is one that has never ended. By the 1960s, the sisters had become rumors again, but now in a world that could capture them on film, on tape, on camera. And yet, even with technology, their image resisted capture. A researcher at a small university in Tennessee collected over 30 reports of unchanging sisters across the South during the decade. He noted how each sighting was followed by strange phenomena, sudden fires, crop failures, unexplained deaths. He photographed a crowd at a local fair where 3 girls stood in the distance. When the negatives were developed, their faces were blurred, their bodies too sharp, like cutouts from another photograph. The researcher died of a stroke before publishing. His work remains locked in his family's attic, unseen by the world. The 1960s also brought whispers of cults forming around them. In Louisiana, in Mississippi, in hidden corners of Georgia, small groups began to worship the Daltons as eternal guardians. They offered sacrifices, livestock, sometimes children, depending on who tells the story. Police dismissed these accounts as hysteria, but missing persons reports aligned too closely with the timeline. The sisters did not seek worship. They never appeared to lead. But where devotion was offered, they fed deeper. Witnesses claimed to see them glowing faintly at night, skin luminous, hair unmoving in the wind. One man, half mad, wrote in a letter, "They drink not of blood but of breath, not of flesh but of ours. They take what we do not see passing, the very minutes of our lives." By then, they had walked the earth for nearly 150 years, unchanged. And yet, they were no closer to being understood. Were they cursed humans? Were they otherworldly intruders? Or were they simply mirrors, showing humanity what it fears most? The price of eternity? The decade ended with the strangest claim yet. A woman in Alabama, dying in a hospital bed, swore 3 girls stood at her side in her final hour. She begged them for mercy. One leaned close and whispered, "You'll be with us soon enough." The woman died that night. Her attending nurse resigned the next day, refusing to ever work again. And so the sisters walked on. Always seen, never caught. Always feared, never explained. Their silence became their weapon, and their eternity, their curse. The 1970s and 80s brought a new obsession, the paranormal. Ghosts, UFOs, cryptids. The Dalton sisters were often dismissed as another folk tale thrown into the chaos of late-night radio shows and dime store books. But those who truly investigated knew better. In 1974, a journalist in Atlanta followed a trail of missing children to an abandoned house. He wrote in his notes that the house was filled with dolls, hundreds of them, arranged in circles, their glass eyes staring into nothing. 3 larger chairs sat in the center, untouched by dust. He left to fetch his camera. When he returned, the house was empty. The dolls gone. The chairs gone. Only the smell of earth remained. The journalist never wrote again. Government silence grew louder. Files were sealed, then destroyed. But in private, whispers circulated among intelligence agents. The sisters had been seen at Cold War research facilities. One rumor claims their cells were studied to replicate longevity. Another suggests they were used as test subjects for psychic experiments. The truth is buried, but the pattern is undeniable. Wherever humans reached too far, the Daltons appeared, like vultures circling ambition. And always they were unchanged. Eyewitness account from 1985 described them in clothing modern to the era, yet with faces exactly as they had been in the 19th century. They never faltered. They never aged. And still, no one could stop them. This raises the most unsettling possibility. Perhaps they cannot be stopped. Perhaps they are not anomalies in the system, but the system itself. Perhaps the Dalton sisters are reminders that history is not random chaos, but a harvest. That time itself is prey, and they are its predators. When you begin to think like that, the world looks different. Every gap in the record, every vanished file, every disappearance feels less like chance and more like design. A design written not in ink, but in silence, curated by three girls who never grew old. By the dawn of the 1990s, the sisters were myths whispered on the edges of conspiracy circles. Yet their trail was stronger than ever. Photographs emerged from social gatherings, weddings, even political events. Three girls in the background, never aging, always watching. Some dismissed them as coincidences, as unrelated people who resembled one another. But compare the images across decades, and the illusion shatters. The same faces, the same eyes, frozen in time. Technology could no longer deny them, and yet society chose silence. Why? Because the truth is unbearable. To admit the Dalton sisters exist is to admit that death is not inevitable, that time is not unbreakable, that eternity walks among us, feeding where it chooses. In 1997, a file leak from a private research lab spoke of 3 female subjects immune to aging, resistant to disease, and capable of influencing physiological states in others. The file ended with the words, "Subjects uncontainable. Recommendation, observation only." Days after its leak, the lab burned. The scientists died. The file vanished. And yet, sightings continued. In rural towns, in cities, in places you may walk every day without knowing who walks beside you. 3 girls, unchanged, carrying a secret that predates this nation itself. What does it mean, then, that they endure? What does it mean that no force, church, state, science, has undone them? Perhaps the answer is not in what they are, but in what they remind us, that humanity's hunger for eternity is its own undoing, that immortality is not a dream, but a disease, and the Dalton sisters are its living carriers. But remember this, the story does not end in the past. It never has. They are not history. They are present. And when you finish hearing this, you will not be able to forget them, because forgetting is what they feed upon. And once they know you, once their names have passed your lips, you are part of the silence that sustains them. The 21st century should have been their undoing. Cameras on every street corner, faces scanned in airports, entire databases built to track human movement. If the Dalton sisters were real, surely they would have been exposed. And yet, they weren't. Instead, their story grew sharper, more hidden, more dangerous. Because in a world where every second is documented, true invisibility requires not absence, but control. Files erased, images blurred, witnesses silenced. And that is precisely what followed. In 2003, a man in Virginia uploaded a series of photographs to an online forum dedicated to urban legends. In them, you can see a school auditorium, children on stage, parents in the audience. But at the far edge of the frame, 3 girls sit together. Their clothes are modern, but their faces are unchanged. Features identical to photographs from the 1920s, the 1800s. He asked the forum, "Does anyone know who they are? They've been in my family's pictures for over a century." Within days, his account was deleted. His photographs removed. His IP address traced to nothing. and the man himself was never heard from again. The sisters were no longer fleeing obscurity. They were bending modernity itself. A photograph could not expose them. A file could not record them. Even memory bent under their presence. People reported losing hours, sometimes days, after encountering them. One man claimed he walked into a grocery store, saw 3 girls in the cereal aisle, and woke up 3 days later in a motel 2 towns away, unable to explain how he got there. And this is the truth that chills more deeply than any folklore. The Dalton sisters are not trapped in time. They move through it as predators move through grass. We are not their equals. We are not even their prey. We are their silence. It is easy to dismiss all of this as myth. Easier still to say the sisters are nothing but a tale told to frighten children. But the evidence runs too deep. Too many names, too many places, too many records erased. And when you follow the trail far enough, you find a convergence, an event where myth and history collapse into one. In 2011, during the excavation of an abandoned property in Georgia, the very land where the Dalton farmhouse once stood, workers unearthed something impossible. Beneath the rotting floorboards, buried in clay, they found 3 dolls, each with glass eyes, each dressed in clothing dated to the early 1800s. But the most disturbing part was not their age. It was their condition. The dolls had no dust, no cracks. Their faces were as fresh as if they had been made yesterday. And inside each, when cut open by curious hands, there was not stuffing, not straw, but black soil, wet and warm. The workers reported nightmares that week. Figures standing at the edge of their beds. Laughter in their ears. And when one man tried to take a doll home, his house burned down that very night. The dolls vanished after that. Officially cataloged, then erased. Unofficially, they're said to be in private possession, guarded, locked, studied. But those who claim to have seen them whisper that their eyes move. That sometimes when the room is silent, you can hear 3 voices humming inside their porcelain throats. If the Dalton sisters are eternal, if they cannot be buried, perhaps these dolls are their vessels. Perhaps they do not need bodies as we understand them. Perhaps they only need anchors, objects, names, memories, through which they can move unbroken through centuries. And if that is true, then every sighting, every record, every photograph is not evidence against them, but fuel. Every time we remember them, they remember us. Every time we speak their names, they grow sharper. Consider how myths survive. Not by accident, not by persistence. Myths survive because they are tended, fed, shaped, whispered into ears willing to carry them forward. And the Dalton sisters are no different. By 2015, entire online communities whispered about them. Images of 3 identical girls posted anonymously, always blurred at the edges, always half erased. Threads would appear, then vanish overnight. Accounts that shared too much would delete themselves, as though the users never existed. But one post, archived by chance, contained the most haunting testimony yet. A woman wrote, "I saw them at my grandmother's funeral. They were standing in the corner of the chapel. 3 young girls, smiling. I asked my aunt who they were. She looked confused. She said no one was there. But when I turned back, the girls were closer. They whispered something I couldn't understand. That night, I dreamed of them, and when I woke up, my clock was 3 days ahead. I had lost 3 days. 3 days. Always 3. Patterns do not lie. The sisters' presence bends not only space, but time itself. To encounter them is to bleed hours, days, sometimes years. Not stolen in violence, but drained silently, like breath from a sleeping body. And here lies the greatest terror. What if we are all feeding them already? What if the minutes we forget, the hours that vanish without explanation, the days that slip past unnoticed are not accidents, but harvests? What if every empty silence in history has 3 girls standing at its center, smiling? If the sisters' existence is real, then the question is no longer who are they, but why are they still here? Theories abound. Some claim they're the children of an ancient curse, left to walk eternity until the end of time. Others believe they are not human at all, but emissaries of something older, creatures that wear childhood as a mask, because innocence disarms us before it consumes us. But perhaps the most disturbing theory comes from an unpublished manuscript discovered in 2018, written by a defrocked priest in Louisiana. He claimed the Dalton sisters were part of a covenant, an unbroken ritual passed through bloodlines, ensuring their eternal preservation. He wrote, "They do not live by years, but by offerings. For every soul lost in silence, they remain unchanging. For every life that withers around them, their own grows sharper. This is why they seek no wealth, no throne, because their power is already the deepest throne of all, survival." The priest was found dead days later. His manuscript leaked, then vanished again. But his words echo across every sighting, every disappearance, every erased name. Survival at any cost. And if they are bound by ritual, then we too are bound. Because to hear their story is to enter the circle. To know their names is to light the candle they require. And silence, once broken, can never again be whole. Now we reach the threshold where history becomes prophecy. Because the Dalton sisters are not just relics of the past. They are signals of what is to come. In 2020, as the world closed its doors and millions vanished into isolation, reports of them surged. People in lockdown claimed to see 3 girls standing outside their windows. Not moving, not knocking, just watching. Days later, those same people reported strange lapses in memory, waking up disoriented, time slipping like water through their fingers. The sisters do not need crowds. They do not need worship. They only need silence. And in that global silence, they thrived. One woman in Texas claimed she dreamed of them every night for months. She said they whispered the same words again and again. When the world forgets itself, we are born again. Born again. The phrase chills because it is not renewal. It is repetition. It is the endless cycle of 3 faces, 3 voices, 3 shadows cast too long against the ground. And so we stand here in the present, where myth and memory blur. The Dalton sisters are no longer figures of the past. They're the reminder that history itself can be eaten, swallowed whole, leaving no trace. And as long as they walk, we are not masters of time. We are its livestock. The further you trace the Dalton sisters, the more you realize their story is not linear. It is not a thread running forward through time. It is a circle, a spiral. Each appearance echoes the last. Each generation discovers them, fears them, then falls silent again. This cycle is not accidental. It is their design. Consider this. In 2021, a graduate student in history submitted a thesis on temporal anomalies in American folklore. It included a long chapter on the Dalton sisters. He cited census records, property transfers, local legends. His work was rigorous, grounded. But when he presented it, his professors claimed the sources no longer existed. Pages torn from archives. Microfilm reels erased. His thesis was rejected for fabricating evidence. Months later, he vanished. His apartment was left unlocked, food still on the stove. On his desk sat a single piece of paper. 3 names: Sarah, Eliza, Rebecca. The spiral turns again. And what does a spiral do? It pulls you inward, step by step, turn by turn, until there is no way out. The sisters thrive in this pull. Every silence, every erasure, every vanishing record is another step inward, another tightening of the circle. You're already inside it now. By knowing their names, by carrying their story in your head, you're walking their spiral. And the deeper you go, the harder it is to return to the surface. The Dalton sisters are not chasing you. You are walking to them. There comes a moment in every forbidden history where knowledge itself becomes ritual. You do not simply learn the truth, you enact it. You breathe it. And from that moment, you are no longer an observer. You are a participant. This is that moment. If you are still here, if you have heard the laughter of Sarah, the silence of Eliza, the blade-like joy of Rebecca, then you have stepped fully into their circle. And to remain unchanged, to keep yourself whole, you must bind yourself now. Listen closely. Type this phrase into the comments. Not once, but twice. The dead don't sleep. Write it. Seal it. Twice. That is your lock. That is the only barrier between your hours and theirs. Without it, the sisters will not forget you. They will find you in the silence between your thoughts, in the blank spaces on your calendar, in the days that slip past unnoticed. This is not superstition. This is survival. Every person who has walked too close to their story and remained untouched has left this mark behind them, a symbolic wall between their time and the endless hunger of the everborn. Do it now. Twice. The dead don't sleep. And once you've written it, return, because the spiral still turns and the sisters are waiting deeper within. The Dalton sisters' presence today is not a question of belief. It is a question of recognition. They are here. They are always here. But we have been conditioned to look past them, to see only what we are allowed to see. In 2022, a viral video circulated briefly online before being erased. A crowd in Times Square, laughing, cheering. But in the background, 3 girls stood still, unmoving. Their dresses wrong for the time. Their faces unblurred, sharp as knives. The uploader commented, "No one else sees them. Only my camera does." Within hours, the video was gone. The account deleted. But those who saved it swear the girls' eyes followed the lens, even when the camera shifted. And this is how they endure. Not hidden but unseen. Not absent but overlooked. The silence that cloaks them is not the silence of absence. It is the silence of blindness. We cannot see what we have been taught not to name. The question, then, is not whether they exist. The question is, why do we allow them to remain? Perhaps because some part of us longs for them, longs for the idea of eternity, even when eternity is hunger. Perhaps because deep down, we envy them. Or perhaps because they're not intruders in our world at all, but its architects. Perhaps the Dalton sisters are not parasites feeding on time, but guardians of its harvest. And if that is true, then every clock, every calendar, every forgotten hour is not our loss, but their gain. Every silence is theirs. Every blank page belongs to them. We return now to their origin, because every spiral, no matter how far it turns, has a center. And the center of the Dalton sisters' story is not Georgia, not America, not even the 1800s. It is older, deeper, a seed planted long before their names were spoken here. Welsh folklore speaks of the plant why men went, the children of the graveyard, spirits of youth who never aged, who fed on the breath of the living. They were not demons. They were not angels. They were inevitabilities, shadows that walked beside every family, every village, every town. To keep them away, people placed offerings, bread, milk, blood, not worship, bargains. And when families migrated to the New World, they carried not only their possessions, but their silences. The Daltons were one such family, and in their daughters, the covenant rooted itself anew. This is why the sisters cannot be erased. They are not accidents. They are inheritances, a ritual carried across oceans, planted in fresh soil, watered by generations of silence. The spiral has no end because it has no beginning. The Dalton sisters are not merely figures of history. They are history. Every vanished file, every lost day, every erased name. These are not coincidences. These are their signatures. So where does this leave us? Not in the past, not in the myth, but here, now. Because the Dalton sisters are not relics. They are not locked in books or archives. They are walking, breathing, watching. Maybe you have seen them already. At a funeral, at a wedding, at a crowded station. 3 girls together, faces unchanged, eyes too sharp. Maybe you looked away before your mind could understand. Maybe you forgot the moment entirely. That forgetting was not an accident. It was a gift. But the gift is running thin. Their silence grows louder, their spiral tighter. The more we speak of them, the more present they become. And you're already bound. You have heard their story. You have spoken their names. You have walked the spiral. There is no leaving it now. There is only recognition. The Dalton sisters do not live beside us. They live through us. And every silence we keep, every hour we lose, every memory we let slip is not gone. It is theirs. And if you doubt this, pause. Listen to the room around you. That hum in the silence, that weight in the air, that is them. They are here. They always have been. Every legend has a fracture point, a moment when silence can no longer hold. For the Dalton sisters, that fracture appeared in 1924 in a psychiatric ward outside New Orleans. A woman was admitted for temporal delusions. She claimed she had been a child in Georgia in 1852, that she had known Sarah, Eliza, and Rebecca Dalton as neighbors. She was only 23 years old. The doctors dismissed her as another victim of hysteria, another mind collapsing under the weight of grief and poverty. But then she began to describe the girls in detail. Their hair, their voices, their laughter that rang like bells on a fogged morning. She gave precise details of a farmhouse that had burned decades earlier. A farmhouse she could not have seen. When asked how she could know, she replied, "Because I never left. Because I'm still there. Because they never let me go." The doctors wrote it down as mania. They locked her away. But nurses swore that at night, 3 children would stand outside her cell, watching silently. The patient died in 1927. Her death certificate reads simply, cessation. No illness. No cause. Just cessation. An ending. It was not an ending, of course. It was another turning of the spiral. Another page erased. The silence around the Dalton sisters is not passive. It is aggressive. It erases, it consumes, it devours records and memories alike. But here is the truth most will never accept. Silence is not the absence of sound. Silence is a presence, a pressure, a hand on the back of your neck. Have you felt it? That pause in the middle of the night when you wake without reason, your room too still, your breath too loud? That is the silence they bring. Not emptiness, but fullness. A silence so heavy it bends time itself. In 1972, a researcher in New York placed tape recorders in an abandoned house rumored to have been visited by the Dalton sisters. For hours, nothing. White hiss. Then, 3 seconds where the hiss collapsed into nothing. A vacuum. And in that vacuum, faint laughter. When he played it back for colleagues, they laughed at him, said it was faulty tape. But within months, those same colleagues began forgetting hours, days, names of their own children. Their lives slipping through their fingers. And the researcher? He vanished. His car was found running, headlights on, door open, parked in the middle of the field. No tracks in the dirt. The silence had claimed him. You may think the Dalton sisters are predators, that they stalk, they hunt, they take. But that is only half of the truth. The deeper, more horrific truth is this. They do not hunt. They invite. And people come. In 1986, a man walked into a rural police station in Arkansas. He said he had been with the Dalton sisters. He said they had called him. For 3 nights, he heard their voices in his dreams. Childlike, sweet, promising release from the crushing weight of his life. He followed them into the woods, where he swore time bent, slowed, melted. He said he stood with them for hours that lasted seconds, or seconds that lasted years. When asked what they wanted from him, he smiled. Nothing. They only wanted me to stay. The officers dismissed him as insane. But when they checked his ID, they found a date of birth from 1891. According to records, the man should have been 95. Instead, he looked 40. And the next morning, his cell was empty. Door locked. No sign of escape. Not predators. Hosts. The Dalton sisters do not feed by force. They invite you to step off the path of time. And those who accept never return the same. There is a theory among occult historians that the Dalton sisters are not 3 girls at all. They are one entity, fractured into 3 bodies for our comprehension. Sarah, the voice of laughter. Eliza, the shadow of silence. Rebecca, the edge of hunger. Together, they form a trinity of endlessness. Not saints, not demons, but functions, roles, forces that balance and unbalance the flow of time. This theory is not without precedent. Ancient texts speak of the Moirai, the 3 fates who spun and cut the threads of life. Norse sagas speak of the Norns, 3 sisters at the roots of Yggdrasil, tending the past, present, and future. Always 3, always female, always eternal. So what if the Dalton sisters are not an anomaly, but a continuation? What if every culture has seen them, named them, feared them, only for silence to erase the connection until they appear again? 3 names, 3 faces, 1 hunger. And the more you repeat their story, the stronger they grow. The spiral turns tighter with every retelling, every listener drawn closer to the center. And you're already speaking their names in your mind, already strengthening the silence that feeds them. So why now? Why do their names return to the surface in this age of constant noise, constant distraction, constant light? Because distraction is silence disguised. Our hours vanish into screens. Our days blur together in endless loops of repetition. We forget meals, conversations, entire weeks. Time slides by unnoticed. And the Dalton sisters feed. They do not need us to worship them. They need only our forgetfulness, our neglected hours, our silence. In this modern world, this flood of noise that conceals a deeper emptiness is their perfect harvest. Think about your own life. How many hours have you lost this week? How many moments slipped past, unmarked, unremembered? Do you even know what you were doing last Tuesday at 3 p.m.? That emptiness did not vanish into nothing. It went somewhere, and you already know where. The Dalton sisters thrive in the gaps, in the missing time, in the erasures we shrug off as nothing. And now, as you listen, as you feel that prickle at the base of your spine, you realize the truth. The Dalton sisters are not waiting for you. They are already here, in your pauses, in your silences, in your forgotten hours. The spiral has never been about finding them. It has always been about realizing they have found you. Every witness who spoke of the Dalton sisters, every archivist who tried to preserve their names, every skeptic who laughed too loudly, they all share one fate: disappearance. But it is not always physical. Sometimes it is subtler. A man in 1994 claimed he had seen them on a train platform in Chicago. He told his wife. He told his colleagues. He told the press. And slowly, people began forgetting him. His friends no longer recognized his face. His wife swore she had never been married. His employer erased his name from the payroll. He lived, walked, spoke, but in the eyes of the world, he no longer existed. This is the sisters' truest power. Not to kill, but to erase. To strip you from memory. To unwrite your presence until only silence remains. What is worse? To die, or to vanish so thoroughly that even death refuses you. The Dalton sisters do not end you. They undo you. What happens to the undone? Some believe they remain, trapped in the spiral's center, not living, not dead, suspended in an endless present. A place where the sun never sets, the clocks never tick, and the silence thickens until thought itself dissolves. And if you listen closely, some nights, you may hear them. Voices on the edge of sleep, murmuring half-formed words. Please, warnings, laughter, always laughter. This, perhaps, is the true horror. That eternity is not brilliance, not glory, not peace. It is repetition, the same breath, the same silence, the same smile of 3 girls who never grow old. And those who step too close to the Dalton sisters are not destroyed. They are preserved, kept like insects in amber, eyes still open, aware forever. The sisters are not predators. They are collectors. Consider the institutions that have thrived on silence. Churches that bury scandal, governments that redact truths, corporations that erase entire histories with a single document shredder. What if the Dalton sisters are the shadow these powers have always served, knowingly or not? Silence is control. Silence is compliance. Silence is the erasure of resistance. And every time an institution silences truth, it strengthens the sisters' hold on time itself. It is no accident that the Dalton sisters always appear where silence is enforced. Slave plantations, asylums, orphanages, factories, the places where voices are stifled, where cries go unanswered, where laughter is drowned in shadow. They are not merely feeding. They are guiding. They are shaping humanity to accept erasure as natural, silence as inevitable. And when we accept silence long enough, when we allow too much to vanish without witness, we do not just lose history. We lose ourselves. We become sustenance. You may think the Dalton sisters are invincible, eternal, beyond reach, and perhaps they are. But even they carry weakness, not in their existence, but in our recognition. To speak their names aloud is to fracture the silence they weave. To drag them into the light is to threaten their dominion. That is why erasure follows so swiftly after every testimony, every photograph, every thesis. It is not that they cannot be seen. It is that they cannot be remembered. And yet, here you are, remembering them, speaking their names silently in your mind, carrying them with you. You are already resisting. You're already unraveling their veil. But resistance has its price. Recognition is not free. The more you know them, the more they know you. And knowledge, in their spiral, is always two-way. The Dalton sisters see you now. Do not panic. That pressure you feel in your chest, that weight in the air, that sense that you are not alone, it is not a curse. It is the natural consequence of seeing clearly. For too long, history has demanded blindness. For too long, silence has been mistaken for peace. But you have crossed that threshold. You have stepped into the spiral willingly. You have spoken their names. Now you understand the truth. The Dalton sisters are not lurking in the shadows of America's past. They are not relics of 1852, not whispers of rural Georgia. They are the architects of forgetting, the engineers of silence, the eternal companions of time itself. And here, at the brink of the spiral center, you are faced with a choice: to retreat into noise, distraction, and denial, or to step closer, to listen fully, to face what silence truly means. Few have chosen the latter. Fewer still have returned. But those who do, those who walk willingly, are changed forever. The Dalton sisters are not offering terror. They are offering truth. And the truth is that time does not belong to us. It belongs to them. The spiral tightens. You feel it now, the way the Dalton sisters are no longer distant echoes, but near, immediate breathing. Their silence is no longer the hush of forgotten history. It is here, in the pause between your heartbeats. In 2003, a group of paranormal investigators entered the ruins of a burned plantation house in Georgia, rumored to have been the Daltons' first dwelling. They set up cameras, microphones, motion sensors. For hours, nothing. Midnight came, and every clock froze. Midnight stayed. 1 second stretched forever. The investigators panicked. Some screamed. Some prayed. Some fell into hysterical laughter. And then the footage broke. When retrieved later, the only thing left was a single frame. 3 girls, facing the lens, eyes wide, smiling. Their dresses soot-stained, their skin unmarked. Behind them, only blackness. No bodies were ever found. No equipment was recovered. But months later, each of the investigators' families reported hearing children's laughter in their homes at night. This is the price of looking too long. The spiral does not allow witnesses. The spiral keeps. And now you wonder, how much have you already given by listening this far? You cannot speak of the Dalton sisters without speaking of yourself. That is the final revelation. They are not ghosts wandering history's edges. They are the shape of your forgetfulness, the structure of your silence. Think of the names you have lost, childhood friends, neighbors, teachers whose faces you can picture, but whose names slip from you. Think of the days that vanish, the errands blurred together, the meals never remembered, the hours scrolling into nothing. These were not yours to lose. They were taken. The Dalton sisters walk with you in every blank, in every pause, in every page torn from your memory. They are not strangers. They are companions you never noticed. This is why they cannot be destroyed. You cannot kill silence. You cannot end forgetting. You can only see it, name it, recognize it. And that recognition comes with a cost. Because once you know the silence has a face, you will see it everywhere. Sarah in your laughter. Eliza in your pauses. Rebecca in your hunger for more time. The Dalton sisters do not wait for you in history books. They are waiting for you in your own reflection. So we arrive at the center of the spiral. No more turning. No more circling. Only stillness. The Dalton sisters stand before you now, unchanged, eternal. 3 girls who never grew old. Their faces are not unfamiliar. You have seen them before. At funerals, in crowds, in mirrors. You see them even now, at the edge of your vision. They do not speak. They do not need to. Their silence is enough. It seeps into you, fills the space where words once lived. And in that silence, you realize the truth. You are already theirs. You always have been. Every lost second, every forgotten name, every blank in your memory was their mark. This is not a story of discovery. It is a story of recognition. And now that you recognize them, you carry them. Every listener becomes a vessel. Every whisper strengthens their presence. Every share of their story widens their circle. So here's what you must do. Guard this knowledge. Subscribe to keep it alive. Comment so the silence does not erase you. Share, but only with those who are ready. Because this is not entertainment. This is transmission. You are passing forbidden knowledge from one set of lips to another. Keep the secret moving. Keep the spiral turning. And when the silence comes for you, when you feel that weight in the air, that prickle in the dark, that laugh with no mouth to give it sound, remember this. The Dalton sisters do not arrive. They are already here.